Please go ahead,
All
ma'am.
right.
We are live.
All right. So, good morning, everyone. In fact, good afternoon. Um, I know we are just in between your lunch, but I thought this is the best time that we all can be free and feel free to eat alongside while you are hearing all the panelists. I am Sheetal Chopra, and I work for Ericsson as India lead on IPR policy advocacy. Also, I'm a chair at National IPR Council of SOCHAM, and I'm today presenting on in the capacity of IPR chair for SOCHAM IPR Council. Along with me, I have two panelists, Hemang and Saurabh. Um, I know most of you might be knowing them already. At least the IP community knows them very well. Hemang is from Qualcomm, and he's the head for startup engineering department. There is a program, there is a whole full-fledged program that Qualcomm runs for startups. It is not only to train startups, but also incubate them and handhold them in terms of their innovations, prototyping, and I think he will be able to tell you more as we give him the mic going forward. Education-wise, he is an engineer, an electrical engineer. So he has got on-grounds experience working with the technology and also working for the technological company. And it's a very good mix. So I'm very happy that Hemang has accepted invite today to talk to all of you. Also, along with us, we have Saurabh Anand. He's from KNS Partners. He's a senior associate there, and he's heading one of the departments, which is primarily patents, and he deals with a lot of prosecution-related queries coming from different startups. He is lawyer by education, also a registered Indian patent agent. So you'll find a lot of patent applications which may have been written and filed by him on behalf of different companies. So we have got very good, a small, sweet panel for all of you. I can see numbers are growing, while we can see numbers in 100 plus, but the system doesn't show it fully. So just for the panelists, for Saurabh and Hemang, we have more than 300 participants as we speak. We will do it this way. We will start with Hemang. He will take around 20 minutes to talk to all of you. He has got a presentation prepared. Then we open up the floor for 10 minutes. So we will let Hemang speak for this 20 minutes and we'll open up the floor in one go. Thereafter, we proceed to Saurabh. So difference between the two speeches that you will find is Hemang will speak to you on ground case studies because he has full-fledged startup program as I just mentioned to you, and Saurabh will then take care of the prosecution side enforcement bit. I think we should get started now, and I would request all the attendees to just post your questions in the chat section. I'll keep a complete tab of it, and as and when, depending on it is, Hemang, over to you.
Okay.
Just, yeah, we need to see your presentation.
Sure. Just give me a second. I'll enter slideshow mode.
Yes.
Can someone confirm that they can see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. All right. Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you, Sheetal. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. And deeper thanks to ASSOCHAM for coordinating this. Like with Sheetal, I'm a part of the IPR Council, so I'm a fellow, I guess, co-chair with her. It's a wonderful working group that we have, and I really admire her and the entire group's passion, to make sure that the IP awareness in the country increases. I'll share with you some working, ground level working information about how startups are approaching intellectual property and how we can think and really apply it in your work. So, it gives me very good pleasure to share this information with you. Again, deep thanks for, if you're skipping your lunch, don't do so. Stay healthy. That's what we can do in these times. So, but my intention is to have this to be an interactive session. So please, anything which I can help answer, I'll do in my best capacity. Now, I have to provide you some disclaimers that, hey, these are my individual views only, and none of this material should be considered as legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an engineer, hopefully like many of you out there. Now, before I dive into how startups should think about IP, I thought let me give you a context about how I and my team have been approaching the work with startups. So we started our incubation program about 4 years ago. So this year really marks our fifth cycle of incubation that we are running, and it started by our Prime Minister's vision, right? That hey, we want a vision of a digital India, and go back to the initiatives, right? Make in India is fabulous. It works wonders for the country. We also believe that if you have a strong design ecosystem that partners with the manufacturing ecosystem, that gives you a tremendous edge. It really helps companies perform much better things, because imagine if you're a designer, you can go to the manufacturing house, you can learn things in a much faster time cycle, you can try out many more experiments, you can get better, and because you're getting better, you'll also push the manufacturing units to make your devices at scale, at lower cost, with higher capacity. So that's kind of the vision with which we are approaching this journey. Something about Qualcomm. Qualcomm at its very core is a system level company, right? We enjoy working on systems level problems. What this means is that when you have a systems thinking mindset, you don't think of an individual piece, you think of an end-to-end system. And when you solve problems that affects the end-to-end system, not only is your solution effective, but impact-wise, you're helping millions and billions of lives. Also, as a product manufacturing company, as a product designing company, you can really feel the advancements across all levels. So if you think about our journey since inception, and now if I think about it, in mid 80s when Qualcomm was started, it was a startup. It was really a professor and a few of his friends who started this company. The name Qualcomm really stands for quality communications. That was the simple problem that they're after. And in solving that problem over time as a company, we have affected innovations in so many areas. The world tends to know of us as the ones who are primarily working on pushing the connectivity edge, the 3G, 4G, 5G, and beyond. But if you think about the various use cases that we have enabled on mobile devices, it covers the entire spectrum, right from say power management to graphics to gaming, to sensors, touch, haptics, multimedia. I mean, those are just some of the areas which I'm mentioning, and it really stems from a core commitment to R&D, and that shows, of course, in the money that we are spending, but more importantly, it's the people, because they share such a passion for solving deep and tough problems that it's quite natural you'll come up with innovations. And that's the level of commitment which I hope you will have, right? You're starting small, but start with one or two really core fundamental problems and don't rest till you solve them completely. But what does the journey look like? And this, I would say, is Qualcomm, of course, participates in this, but we have other partners who are very good, who follow such a life cycle process, starting from fundamental research, right? And when I was pursuing my doctorate, I did work on really fundamental research. However, a lot of times what happens is that your research stays in the lab. How do you get it out there? How do you work towards commercializing it? And for that, you have to figure out who your partners are. It can be standards bodies, it can be infrastructure operators, developer ecosystem. That's big, right? Because if you're creating, let's say, a hardware hardware product, you want people to develop and make applications, use cases on it. Of course, you have device manufacturers like the cell phone makers, the IoT device makers, and it's a virtuous cycle. Everyone has to collaborate with each other, and that leads to an upward spiral of growth. So to your world also, I say you might be in this domain where you're doing fundamental research, or you might be a developer. Figure out who are your partners and what are the best ways that you can collaborate with them. What that will do is that'll give you insight into what some of the foundational innovations are. And again, as you collaborate, you will grow. That is inevitable. So very briefly, let me cover the incubation program that we have. And this is under an umbrella of activities that we are calling as the Qualcomm Design in India program. At the heart of it is QDIC, our longest running hardware incubation program. Now, this is an incubation program meant for early stage startups, which are developing products that solve mobile compute, that solve AI system level problems on the edge. We also partner with universities where we support PhD and master's students through our Qualcomm Innovation Fellowship program. Now, not every startup will always be stuck in the early stage. Eventually, they will grow, and as they grow, they might face problems when it comes to scaling that technology. Right? Some things may work really well at, let's say, 100 units production, but when you're scaling up to the lakhs and the crores unit level of production, there'll be different technological issues. So we have a late stage partner program where we work with startups, who are really looking for acceleration. So that's called as our accelerated design program. And throughout I guess this entire journey, we partner with various stakeholders at the government and industry for making sure that our startups get the right visibility, they get the right exposure to partnership. Me and my team, we also work on them having a keen attention towards intellectual property. We want them to look at IP as their business strategy. And I'll be sharing some of these thoughts with you. Now, we do have a separate ventures fund that is different than the innovation program, but it's a ventures fund which is committed to making investments in the country. So we always try to give visibility to our ventures team if there's any startup which is doing very well, or any place where some additional insights can help them. Now, I lead the Qualcomm Innovation Labs, so our core things that we provide to all the startups are product design services. This goes back to our expertise in system level architecture and systems level mindset. We work with them with regards to intellectual property workshops, and we do have incentives for them so that they are filing patents continuously. And we provide them business mentoring, because every startup has some core strengths, but in some of the other areas, they can benefit from people who've had that journey before. So we try to make sure that this program is really fulfilling their journey, and it's a long journey as they go from an early stage startup, say in the pre-series A, to hopefully later rounds of funding. And our program, by the way, is all cash only. We don't take any equity. Now, over the years, here's a snapshot of the kind of startups that we have worked with. We work with startups in the smart cities arena, a lot of ML problems, and this bucket is increasing by the day. As we speak, we are in the shortlisting process of our 2020 batch. So in a few days from now, we'll be announcing our next cohort. We have wearable startups, automotive, medtech. Some of these companies are recognizable, and I'll tell you what these red circles mean. Agritech, compute, fintech, robotics, and drones. So if you look at the spectrum of problems being solved, it's amazing. All this talent is in the country. All these startups are based in India, and they're designing and developing these solutions in the country itself. Now, when they approach us, they usually have, in our incubation program, they usually have an early stage prototype, and they may have some market traction. And the red circle around these companies highlights the ones that have actually commercialized their product offering. So that's a huge and a big milestone, right? So we want them to go through this journey. Yeah.
Yeah, your connection seems a bit
Yeah, Sheetal.
lagging.
Was
Is it
that
only
question?
with me or? Yeah, no, I'm just saying that your connection seems a bit lagging.
It's with me as
Uh,
well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
and
I'm
in
not sure
fact,
what to
your
do, but
video is also
maybe let me turn
blurring.
off my video for the
Yes,
let me turn off my video, see if that helps.
go ahead.
Okay. So here's where you can see some of the milestones that they are receiving, and say getting featured in ET Top 50. We take very good pride in the patents that they are filing. So over the years, our startups have filed for 85 plus patents. Now this is a snapshot number. I know this number is greater by about 7 or 8 patents. Since I last pulled up this data, and the commercial product offering. Now, how can you relate to this thing? To me, it starts with why. A key factor of the ones that are making their products as a commercial offering, they have a very strong why. Why is the problem so important for you to solve? For example, if I look at a company in the medtech arena, let's say Artelus. Artelus was looking at diabetic retinopathy. What this means is that they are analyzing the images in your eyes using their ML models, and they are determining if a patient has a risk of diabetes or not. In rural India, where people may not have access to a lot of good medical facilities, and even more so, people may not want to get tested. Taking an image of eye and telling you an indicator is a much easier thing that people will adopt. So that's a strong why statement that they have. I'll give you another example, like Wagger. So they are in the pet tracking segment. So you have a lot of people have dogs as pets in their homes. They're their family members, and they don't want them to get lost. But how do they track where the pet is? And especially in an urban environment, if the dog is lost, it can be hard to find them, right? So they have a very strong why. Now then, once you identify your why, make it a very core analysis of what you do. After that, you move on to what is it that you're going to solve about that problem. So for example, Wagger is after the location accuracy. Now we can think of location accuracy as important in so many segments. For example, you want to find a car in a parking lot, and they may have a location accuracy requirement of, I'm just making this number up, of let's say 1 meter. Okay, plus or minus 1 meter is about 3 feet. You can see your car in a parking lot, 3 feet here and there, not a big problem. But for a pet, let's say in a dense urban environment, that may not be the right thing. Or really, what they want to know is, did the pet escape a community boundary or not? So you have to define the what. Similarly, if I give you the Artelus example, they are looking at, hey, they're in the diabetes space, but they want to analyze or give the prediction of risk of diabetes by analyzing eye images. Okay, so that's the what which they are identifying. And after you do that, you then move to how are you going to solve it. So for Artelus, it starts with vision, but their key innovation is their machine learning models which they're developing behind the scenes. As they get more and more data, as they get more and more eye images, they are making their algorithm better and better. And then they're partnering with doctors and medical institutes to make sure their prediction gets more and more accurate. Similarly with Wagger, once they figured out the location aspects, what they started playing with was looking at activity of dogs. Like, okay, some dogs, we need to make them more active. So how can we provide this data to the pet parent? Okay, so it's a very simple framework. Why? Define the fundamental problem you're observing, move to what, define the space in which you will innovate, and how. How will that innovation come to life? That's the framework you need to adopt. So now with this, I understand you've received some of this information before, If you do, please bear with me. I'll repeat some of these things, at least the really fundamental ones. As startups, you are looking at problem with a different lens. You have your own take on a problem. You are unhappy with the existing solutions. It is very natural that you will generate intellectual property. And absolutely, you have to treat it like an asset. Focus on the word property. When we think of property, when we think of land, flats, we're like, okay, that adds value to your net worth. This is intellectual property. It adds value to your company's worth. So think of it that way. For a business to succeed, you must strive towards protecting it. That is the very first step. Now, in India, we have various types of intellectual property. I will not cover all of these things. To me, my expertise, where I focus the most, is on patents. However, an easier way, especially when it comes to devices or tech companies, is do this kind of an IP review probably every 2 months or every quarter. Let's say I'm just showing a phone as an example. It could be a pet tracking device, or it could be this vision-based solution. If you're developing code, of course, you have to think about copyright. You might be generating content, user content. You could be generating other, or you could be using other content. So think of copyright. The names which I told you were the product names that can be different than the company names. And as a company, you can introduce many products, and all of those will have different brand names, different logos. So those are trademarks you have to think about. I'll go back to the Wagger example, which is the pet tracking unit. When they started working with this, a problem that again they identified was that when you think of dogs, they all have different sizes. So they have to come with a collar which really fits any kind of a dog breed very well. That's on two fronts. It has to be easy for the pet owner or the pet parent to take off the collar, wash it every now and then, and snap it back in. The other also, it must be comfortable for the end user, who is the dog in this case. So they spend a lot of time on industrial design. When it comes to patents, if you are working on something which a standards body will adopt, you have to think about standard essential patents. In my experience, most of the startups tend to work in the implementation patents. So for example, you might be improving the location accuracy. You might be unhappy with the RF characteristics. The signal to noise ratio is something which needs to be optimized. I spent a lot of my early research work working on display tech and graphics tech. So how do I improve the frame rate? How do I, let's say, even reduce the power consumption that a display is consuming, and so on. Now, what can be patented? Inventions which are new. So there is something called as inventive step. I won't dive this, and industrial applicability, right? You've heard about these things. What you must always, when you do your IP review, especially think of, if it's a high-tech company, you have to think mostly in these two segments. I'm just generally speaking, because you're most likely creating a new apparatus or devices which comprises the invention, or you're innovating around new methods. Hey, there's a method to reduce power consumption by 20%. Here's a method to improve my location accuracy to say 20 centimeters, things like those. If you are mostly in other spaces, right, you might be working on process patents or product patents. But do be aware that most patents are improvement patents, meaning why is this important? You kind of have to know what has been done before, so that when you clarify what this novelty is, you are really speaking to the exact improvement you are bringing to the table. That stems from your why, what, and how framework. Now, you must be aware of these things, but there are amazing rights that patent holders enjoy. Think about the property part, about intellectual property, right? You have rights. Others cannot use that property without your permission. You can generate additional revenue streams, and this is something which startups are doing time and again. Cross licensing is something which you must consider to partner with other companies to create better products. You want to prevent competitors. It creates big barriers to entry. Increasingly, so when we started this incubation journey, I remember talking to VCs, and they said, "Hey, just tell me about if startups have filed for any patents, right?" So they were just looking at a number. Fast forward 4 years, now they are asking about what is the quality of patents that these startups are filing. So even the VCs are getting IP savvy. You can gain time for developing things. To me, the marketing credibility you get. Like I spent a lot of my early education years in the US. There, if you take a single coffee cup, they give you a cardboard sleeve so that your hand doesn't get burned by the hot coffee. That cardboard sleeve can be protected by 7 to 10 patents. Just that cardboard sleeve, and they write it very clearly. What the patent numbers are. The marketing credibility which you get is unbelievable. You must start doing that. If you're filing for patents, start write patent pending on your products. Start writing that at least on your website. Few general I guess advice. Before you publish or display, here this applies to you pitching at competitions or to investors. Consider those as public disclosures. What that means is before you are demoing your product, you are displaying it to VC, trying to impress someone, file a patent application, file at least a provisional patent application, and then move towards your demo days or your pitch sessions. Although anyone can draft patent specifications, I highly recommend working with professionals, because there is a legal language which is involved over there. They are the pros at it. Trust them, and trust their ability. To me, the time is right to file for patents in India. The government is giving so many incentives and really fast tracking the process. Startups, you must take advantage of this. If you should remember PCT. I guess you've heard of it, to explore the filing internationally. And I guess the validity you probably know, and I'll skip a few of these. I want to give you a couple of takeaways. I'll repeat this message, which is use the services of a specialized firm, IP firm, or a law firm. Absolutely work towards your own IP and work towards protecting it. And if you're taking this effort, recognize and respect the IP of others too. That again leads to an ecosystem of change. It makes the entire country IP aware and IP savvy. Now, I'd like to stop here. There are some useful links which I'll leave over here. Do check out the resources at the Ministry of MSME website. Do check out the resources at the METI website. All these resources are available online. The step which is required is you going to those links and taking advantage of these incentives. Sheetal, I guess I can stop here and see if there's any questions I can help answer.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. This was very good presentation in terms of letting the audience know what Qualcomm does, because I think most of the startups don't even know this kind of initiative being organized by some of the companies like yours. Also, we received couple of questions in the first conference webinar itself, where startups said that there are two key challenges. One is that how do they identify that they have an IP in-house? How do they, one is creation. I mean, sometimes it is serendipity, you are working, it's a workshop innovation, you come up with it. How do they identify, one, that they have an IP? And second, and the biggest challenge is the funding. So it's not only about filing in India, where we keep saying that it's 75% reduction in the patent filing fee, official fee is too low, or patent office has already given all the startups mentors who can give free advice and free prosecution, filing patent applications in Indian patent office. But they say it takes more than a crore or something when it comes to filing patent applications abroad and getting a grant. For example, if you take EU and US, because there are translation issues, and it becomes even more a pain point when it comes to China and Japan as a jurisdiction, because they don't accept English. So it's funding
Right.
for filing prosecution first is the creation and how do they get to know that they have an IP. Second is how do they get funds for grant, because I think besides Ministry of ICT, there is no other grants as such available. Venture capitalist comes only at a stage when they have to pick up your invention, when it is able to sustain the market, and all that viability test has to be proven. So if Himang, you can give some clarification on that, then I'll pick up rest of the questions.
Okay, wonderful. So let me start with the first one, which is the creation of IP, right? I'll be very blunt in saying that there is no shortcut to it. It really comes down to spending time with the problem, and even more than that, it is defining the problem. I
Yeah.
I set a very basic framework, right? It is why, what, and how, right? So it comes down to how you are defining the problem and working in a qualitative space, and always start thinking about how are you going to solve it. Just thoughts will not do. You have to experiment a bit, and some days you will get lucky. Uh, I figured that with some research breakthroughs when I was working, I didn't expect to see them. Uh, Reflecting back, it just comes down to the amount of time you're persisting and not getting lost uh, in the day-to-day things. Like you have to leave aside some time where you are meaningfully solving the problem. Uh, Also know that it is not an individual journey. Brainstorm with a team. Sometimes our own perspectives are limited, right? Because let's say if I spend a lot of my time in display engineering, I'll view the world in some manner. But say now that I know say Saurav's background or Sheetal's background, the three of us together, if we look at a problem, we'll all have our own respective perspectives. So bring that diversity into play. Innovation is rarely a solo exercise. It takes teamwork. So work on that. There's no shortcut to it. I think the second question now is I guess the international patent filing and the funding, and all those requirements. Yes, it is expensive. Sometimes it is merely due to the fees, and you add on that, say what it would take to get translation, all that. Those are costs. Those are services that you will have to pay for in most cases. Now, Ministry of Electronics and IT, they have funding for international filing. I believe that was highlighted. You can look at that. Apart from the national government or national level, incentives, a lot of the state governments also have their own incentives, and they don't, meaning they allow this double dipping, meaning you can go to one body for say part of the funding and another body for the other part. So be creative that way. The third thing which I'll say is use PCT to your advantage. Take the PCT cost. I think you probably will have to bear that. But if you first file in India, you get a year's time to fill that form, and after that you still have about say 2 years of time. So you are spreading your costs, over let's say, Sheetal and Saurabh, please correct, the exact term, but you are spreading the cost over say roughly a 2.5 year period. So be smart about that. I'm a Gujju. I always think, paisa kaise bachana hai, right? So I'll spread my cost over there. What this 2.5 years will give me is that I'll get validation of my idea, whether it's working in the product, whether my customers are liking it, and whether it makes sense from an ROI perspective to say put more money into it for international filing. Once I have that conviction, getting support either from the government level or from the VC level, that becomes an easier task because you've done all the validation yourself and you have data to prove it. But yeah, if you just say that, yeah, I wish to first file internationally right away, that can become an expensive strategy. Take advantage of the incentives that the India government is allowing. First file in India, follow the process, and it can be a financially manageable venture.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think adding to what you mentioned also about IP as a collateral, where you can keep your IP as a collateral to receive finances from bank. Of course, that's
Sure.
very nascent in India, but in other parts of the globe, it is quite heavily being picked up. But now with Madam Nirmala Sitharaman, when she announced this year's budget, she very clearly said that she wants India to become hub for IP as collaterals. So I'm sure Government of India will soon come up with a lot of incentives in that area. But all three of us, we definitely agree with this point that funding is a critical issue. It's not easy to get that fully sorted out, because even after 2.5 years, like you mentioned, Hemang, one has to then make a decision of entering into a national phase, and then that is how translations happen. But as Hemang mentioned, if in 2 years you don't find a venture capitalist, if you don't find a matchmaker, if you don't find this to be good enough for marketing, I think that can be easily pruned. Otherwise, there are a lot of fundings opportunities available. So this takes me to some of the other questions for you, Hemang, and then
Sure.
we go to Saurabh's presentation. So he says, I think almost most of this I think you have already answered. Could you elaborate a bit on IP incentives given to startups? How do you determine the same? Are incentives for IP filing given in exchange for license or assignment, or they are straight out rewards?
Good. So our IP filing incentive is, so we provide, I'm thinking of the accurate number. It's roughly, we provide patent filing fees for 2 patents in the country, and they have to be patents. So we don't provide incentives for, say, industrial designs. Now it can be anyone who drafts. All we look for is that they've really filed the patent. So we look for the receipt, that the patent filing receipt. We don't even look whether they use an attorney or whether they did self filing. It's the entire freedom is theirs. The only criteria is that it must be relevant to the work that they perform during incubation, and it has to be relevant. So that's roughly I'll say is that we know the kind of problem that they are solving, and we know it's going to be either relevant or not, right? And largely speaking, every startup has done a fabulous job, in adhering to those really rough guidelines. And the entire IP belongs to the startup. We don't get anything from that.
Okay, good. And then there is a question on, could we know which bank accepts IP as a collateral? So as far as I know, there are 2 banks, Kotak and SBI, that definitely has a good experience in terms of use of IP as a collateral. But any of the other panelists, if you have any other idea, which bank can they go to? I think any government-related bank would have that.
Yes,
Okay.
Sheetal, you currently or agree, like only 2 banks as of now. But yes, any government bank will definitely accept that as a collateral as well.
Right. So next question is, can idea be patented in India? Hemang?
We have to go with the to me all ideas are patentable, but you have to satisfy the 3 criteria, right? That they must be, what you're proposing is novel. You have to satisfy the inventive step, and it must be useful. If I break it down in simpler terms, you have to teach others how to implement the idea. You can't just have a hand wave and say jadoo or ho gaya. That can't work. You have to give people at least a flow chart, work towards a block diagram. When I work with not just startups but even my colleagues in the company, like if you cannot break your idea down to a block diagram or a flow chart uh, that others can discuss around, then you've not thought it deep enough. So break it down to that level. Only after that it makes sense to think whether you have something novel or not.
Right. And I think when Hemang speaks about novelty, he is not just talking about relative novelty. It has to be absolute. It's not only that you are novel in India, but novel nowhere else. I mean, any patent publication, whether grant by way of application, somebody's research thesis, some newspaper clipping, journal articles, research papers, all become a prior art for the invention, immaterial of which jurisdiction are they published in. So it has to be an absolute novelty, because we keep getting a lot of question that my idea is novel in India, but in some other part of the world it is known, so it's no more novel. So next question is, we would request the chair to give a suggestion. Okay, so there is a question. He says we would request the chair to give a suggestion to Government of India. One second, I'm not able to see them fully on a screen. To build a centralized organization which can support all creations. It will help. If we can centralize Aadhaar, PAN, why not IP support fund? It's a very good question, I'm telling you. I mean, because not everyone knows which all and believe me or not, every government department is doing their level best to support in some or the other way. We have Ministry of ICT, we have DAITI within that. We also have DPIIT, which is where we have CPAM, Center for Intellectual Property Asset Management. We have State Government of Bihar and UP doing a lot of activities. We also have Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises that has opened up a lot of facilitation centers. So sir, your idea is very good, and we as chairs and co-chairs, Hemang, I think we should propose this to Government of India, that we need a consolidated central repository where all the government initiatives can be at least highlighted, or which makes it easy even for IP as a collateral. Like Saurabh was mentioning about only maybe 2 or 3 banks right now, but why not have a good repository of everybody in that central space? So Hemang, maybe should we work on that at next agenda for our IP committee meeting?
I love that suggestion. So thank you so much to whoever suggested it. Really appreciate it.
All right, then let's pick up one more question. Hi, Hemang. I am Abhinesh from Balair Motors, automotive technology-based startup. Sorry, give me some time because it's so many points down and screen is just so small. So I have to scroll it a lot. And there are so many points within that question. My God, yeah.
मैम जो बॉक्स है उसके राइट साइड में एक स्क्वायर बॉक्स है मैम, उस पर क्लिक कीजिए.
Square box.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know how to go that way. I'm finding it a bit hard, but let me do this way. Like we'll learn it maybe offline. So he's from automotive technology startup. Hemang, this question is specifically to you. We have 2 granted patents on hybrid systems for motorcycles, out of which we have licensed 1 patent to a leading OEM. My questions are, and there are a list of questions. First is, our hybrid systems involve a control unit with the logic of operation of the whole hybrid system. Our granted patents are the mechanical arrangements. How can I secure an IP for hybrid control unit, which is the facilitator of whole technology? My patent attorney said that we can't apply patent for electronics or a logic. Hearing you mention that improving the GPS or display is also patentable now gets me thinking, can I patent my hybrid control unit with logic of operation?
So on the exact thing, let me, I guess divert the question to Saurabh, right? He's the patent attorney and he can probably give you the best advice. But thanks so much, and I would like to congratulate you for licensing your technology. That's a big achievement for startups, and we need more examples, like you. Sheeta, we should probably take note of his company's name and just add it like, hey, these are startups which have done well, right? It's not just filing IP, it's you're doing the right thing, treating it as an asset, commercializing it, separately making product developments on your own. So congratulations for that.
Yes.
Saurabh, over to you if you can.
Saurabh,
we
Yeah.
provide the input.
Yes, definitely. As he has rightly mentioned that he has got 2 patents. So I am sure he must be aware of what are the requirements for getting those patents. So in a very nutshell, on the basis of just 2 titles of the patent, we won't be in a position to advise whether we can actually get a patent for it. But as Hemang rightly mentioned, that subject to these 3 criteria being solved, there is definitely a way out to get a patent for this as well, provided even if there is some kind of form of shape of technology already patented for that. But there's always a way out. But that will obviously subject to absolute novelty, inventiveness, and capable of industrial application.
Yeah, and second question I'm skipping because I think hearing from what Saurabh said, maybe he needs more details for giving a best legal advice, where he's mentioning about, the next question is working on telematics system. He's working on telematics system also.
Yeah.
And what are the possibilities of applying for IP in such a system? So I think Saurabh maybe will give you contact details. We'll have discussions with him so that he gives a little bit more details
Sure.
to us. But the next question is very good. I think it's brain picking, which says, how do one price the royalty or upfront fee for licensing? This is the pricing what is the pricing structure of for an IP? Our first licensing is with a top automotive OEM, and we had no hand in negotiation, and the financials was fixed by OEM. But for now on, I want to fix up the structure for pricing of IP licensing. So I think this shows it's an overwhelming question. At least it shows your curiosity and your leadership in even deciding the IP licensing part. And as an IP owner, it's your share to come up with what is the best price, and there are different valuation methods. I think that's a separate program altogether to identify what your value of IP could be. It could be cost based, it could be market based, and most of the times it completely depends on negotiations between licensee and a licensor. If there is no benchmark available, then both of the parties sit together and decide what is the incremental value that your technology is bringing. What is the right price point that a consumer is ready to pay for that new invention? So for example, if there is a mobile phone which never had camera, and now there is an invention of camera and you dovetail it, or now even let's pick up the most recent example of automotive, which is now becoming connected cars, and that you are able to connect back to the healthcare to send you some help in case of car breakdown, or there are other telecommunication system in terms of GPS and to identify where all there is a road congestion, and consumer is ready to pay that extra cost over that automotive car which is now connected. So sometimes you also identify price of your IP depending on the market survey, on how much consumer is ready to pay for that. Other side, it is also depending on how you negotiate in good faith with each other. But I would like to learn from Hemang and Saurabh on what do you think on his question.
I think very pertinent point, Sheetal. I think this is, I really could not have provided a better answer than what you did. What I also recommend apart from that is to really, I guess, at your end, right, when you're creating a deck for yourself, figure out what is the key innovation that you're bringing. Why do you think that solves a problem in a very impactful manner? I think that with that core set, I think you can then move towards the negotiations. And with regards to what Sheetal said, I mean, I'll just say ditto. That was a fabulous answer.
Yeah, and I would just like to add
Saurabh.
one thing here. So when you are on the other side of the table as a startup and you are actually going and negotiating in a room with an like fully fledged establishment, you always go with a mindset. So when you, as rightly stated by Hemant, you have to first identify the key area, and you have to enter that room with that key area. Because I have been involved in a couple of negotiations, and actually there are days where we have seen such startups like this who are actually dictating terms vis-a-vis license, because they know the key things what they are actually providing, and that actually worked out quite well. So yeah, that is the main thing which we should enter, the mindset with which you are entering the negotiation, in addition to the approaches you suggested.
Yes, and we also get an information from one audience. Her name is also Sheetal, and she says IDFC Bank also is picking up IP as a collateral. Is there any certificate for this webinar? So Anup, maybe if you can ask Nahid or Yashpal later, if certificate could be produced, it could be an e-certificate as well. I think that should be fine, and people can print it out at a later stage at their convenience.
Okay, ma'am.
Please, please tell us IP India job related any information in this time. I couldn't get your question. IP India job related any information in this time. I don't think I have got the answer quite well. If you can just give a little bit more details what you want to ask. How can I check all ready patents on government website? All ready patents. You mean the granted patents? So Indian Patent Office provides, there is whole list of search engine available where you can find out applications, published one as well as granted patents, which are already available in public domain. Saurabh, if you don't mind, when you send your final presentation to us, please include that search engine link where this search can be made with regard to granted and applications by the Indian Patent Office. Also, by USPTO and by EPO, because these are all free.
I'll do that.
Is that okay? Yeah. How serious is IPR community for domain names? Clearly, during COVID, the digital brand protection has taken a front row. Yes, this is what we discussed in last webinar. I don't know whether you were available to hear that webinar or not, but we discussed that how, in fact, in the first webinar itself, at least in my presentation, I covered that COVID has been putting no impact on new businesses coming into the picture when it comes to at least domain name registrations. And we have seen new domain names getting registered in lakhs. Although there are a lot of fake domain names also, which are being registered because people are they're cheating people by selling products under the name of some other company, which one has to be mindful of. And we discussed also what are the enforcement mechanisms which are available. We'll be happy to share with you that slide again. But if we have not been able to address to your question, please do come back and let us know. So IPR community is definitely serious about domain names, as many domain names are now getting registered. It's hardly become, there is hardly a difference between a trade name and a domain name, because most of the companies are doing their businesses online. They have become e-commerce based, and everyone wants to know about. It's no more just brick and mortar structure. Everyone wants to let other community know about their business, and domain name is one area. I think we should close this session now for Hemang's presentation, and we move on to Saurabh, to you now. I think we are sharp at 1:56. You have all your 20 minutes, so go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So can anyone confirm that you can see my slide?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Sheetal. Thank you, Hemang, and thank you, SHM, for bringing me today on board for this particular session. As I have been introduced by Sheetal about starting my journey as a patent agent, but gradually over the period of time when I started drafting patent applications, then suddenly there was a surge in my career where I actually started seeing how to protect it, and if something you have got it, how to enforce it. So that was the shift from where a patent agent attorney has now become a litigator. And I think I would like to focus more on that aspect vis-a-vis, which is very important for a startup community going ahead. So I like to first set the context, which I am trying to suggest, and everyone might be hearing about the national IPR policy. And I would just like to pick one or two words from our mission statement of IPR policy. If you can see in the slides: foster creativity and innovation, and thereby promote entrepreneurship, social, economic, and technological importance. If you see the other slide as well, these are all the objectives of national IPR policy, which we all keep on listening day in, day out. But the question is whether these objectives are really been met or not. If you will ask us, yes, government is doing all the best possible in their capacities to actually fulfill these objectives. However, I would like to just pick upon two objectives to proceed from here. Objective number 5 and objective number 6, that is commercialization of IPR, which we had a brief discussion, and in the past sessions also we had a detailed discussion about how to actually commercialize of IPR. But I'd like to focus more upon objective number 6, that is enforcement and adjudication. What the government has actually done under the mission statement of National IPR Policy, which will actually help the startups going forward. I would like to just pinpoint few things where vis-a-vis our National IPR Policy, which must have been captured in multiple places and in various places what we have seen. So you have a reduction of fees. As on 18th February, there are around 289 facilitators. There are facilitators for IP. You can actually, as we were discussing, get an effective loan guarantee scheme. There are multiple eligible for getting processing the patent application expedited, and so on. But the whole point is there are two buckets here. One, you actually helping a startup to get an IP, as well as you are actually reducing the fees. Now, what is the next step? So from here, two roads, in my opinion, starts. One is commercialization and one is enforcement. Before we delve more into that, I would like to give a brief opening to this, and which we discussed in our earlier sessions also, that how a startup could actually position itself vis-a-vis its IP. There could be three limbs attached to it. First one is positioning, differentiating from competing products, and leverage. As Hemang was also mentioning about identification,
I think I lost your audio, Saurabh.
There is some problem with his connectivity. Maybe we wait for a few seconds.
should I continue?
Yes, we
Yeah.
lost you in between.
Okay, now it's better.
Yes.
Now, another thing is about assessing your risk involved. When you are actually going ahead for any kind of IP, be it trademark, patent, design, you have to be very clear what you are actually going for. For that, you would require trademark search, patentability search, freedom to operate. And one important thing which we generally miss out, if someone is coming from his previous employer and starting on his own, what are the confidentiality clauses in their employment agreement with the erstwhile employers, if any? This is one of the aspects which we generally leave while discussing how an IP and a startup should position itself as a differentiator. This is first aspect of a differentiator for a startup as IP. The second could be competition. Why you want an IP? The first thing, proprietorship. The moment you apply, you will become a legal proprietor, at least as an applicant for that particular IP, be it a trademark, patents, copyrights, designs. Second question, what we were actually discussing in the past also, relevant market. You need to very clear about it, in which market you are actually going ahead. That will help you in assessing whether you want an IP in that particular jurisdiction or not. Third is, it should be strategically based upon the cost and timelines. And we also had one question regarding that particular thing, and Hemang pointed out about the PCT weights. So yes, the market analysis before actually entering into a space of an IP by filing of IP application, very important. And the last but not the least is IP marking, which is very important, as Hemang also touched upon it. It's a very less used concept, and we have to highlight whenever we are going for any kind of funding, whenever you are launching our website, patent pending, design pending. TM sign that TM applied for, R sign that you have a registered mark, and so on and so forth. So one thing which is generally missed out by any startup, what I have actually felt upon in my career, that they have never utilized the concept of IP marking to the fullest. Now the third thing is how to leverage it. IP policies in place. Now, as a startup, when you start, you don't actually think about it, that who is joining you, who is leaving you, but it should be in the first place that who is joining you should be at least bound by some kind of confidentiality agreement, employment agreement, and so on. Now, keep a watch on your competitors. As a startup community, you know that what is the importance of an idea. You might be having an idea, and that's idea surrounding the same idea might be actually thought of by some other person. So you have to be very vigilant about your rights as well as the markets, which will obviously include competitors. And right now, as we were discussing about know your position and act accordingly, when you are actually coming across any infringer, you discuss, negotiate with the party involved, and obviously, depending upon the other side of the table, you have to act accordingly. That brings to another question here. Do we only require to file an IP only for the purposes of Objective 5 or National IPR policies? I just want to commercialize it. And that's actually the statistics also shows. Patents in last year, it's increasing day by day. Trademarks increasing again day by day. This is a trend which is there till 2018. And this is the trend overall. If you can see patents, designs, and trademark, the trend is actually it is increasing. But why it is increasing? The first thing, and as a startup community, we also should look into the fact that if you got a patent, design, trademark, how you are going to protect it tomorrow. And I'll come to the same vicious cycle as Hemang was mentioning, how you should think before you're going for IP, the concept of why, what, and how. When you get a patent, when you get a trademark, I would come to the another side of the angle, whether IP enforcement is really necessary for startups when we are actually struggling for funds, we are actually struggling for whether we can get an IP, how much cost involved. In all this scenario, should we actually think about it or no? The answer to this question is really a threefold strategy: when to enforce, how to enforce, and why to enforce. I'll try to focus on these three concepts. It is purely an expenditure versus investment. If you believe you are simply filing a suit or sending a legal notice is expenditure and nothing material, don't do it. But you really believe, no, it's actually hurting my business, then please bucket it accordingly under the concept of investment and not as an expenditure. Because generally, when I go for a court hearing or I been approached by any startup, first thing, sort of what will be the cost? Because for getting a patent, I spent around 2-3 lakhs. Now you're telling me for getting the courts, I will spend so much. My simple question is, how big your market? Second, how this other party is actually harming you. If you believe the harm is more than your market, please do it. If you will not stop it right now, it will increase tomorrow and reach to an end where you will not be able to stop it at all. Now, the another questions which I generally face when any person comes to me that I don't want to enforce. Why should I enforce? Court cases are like 10 years, 20 years down the line, and I'm not going to spend so much money out of it. Why? The answer lies in 4 or 5 points. I have tried to figure it out here. Statutory recognition of IP rights. If you file any IP application, it will actually make you a legal owner of that property. In addition to that, even you have not filed an IP, there are common law remedies which will actually make you owner of any kind of confidential information, trade secrets, at least under the contractual laws which are available in India. Third question, which everyone asks, why to go to court when the trial takes around 5 years, 6 years down the line? Now the situation is pretty better. Government has actually worked towards Objective 6 and introduced Commercial Courts Act, in which the whole timeline for any suit, any IP suit, is now being squeezed to 18 to 24 months. And even that's, if someone will ask me whether this is actually working, the answer is yes. Now it is working. It was not working 2 years down the line. Now, last is coordinate action is a legal term which is generally we use in a legal parlance. Is that should we actually wait for the infringement to happen? Now the Supreme Court has told don't wait it. Even if you have an apprehension that someone is gonna ruin your entire idea, ruin your entire IP, you are entitled for a relief just based upon that. You don't have to wait that someone has actually taken away your property from yourself. That comes to another angle. When the suit will go on, even for a commercial matter, like say 18 to 24 months, are we have to just sit down for 24 months? Because by that time, the whole idea will become obsolete. That whole technology will become obsolete. Should we actually have to wait for the 24 months, even if I'm enforcing it? The answer is no. There are remedies under law. Even during the pendency of the whole suit, you can actually ask for an interim relief. When I'm asking about interim relief, I file a suit today. Along with this, I will file an application. During the pendency of suit, the court should grant an injunction against the infringer. Injunction means stopping the other party from infringing my IP. And during that entire process, the court will look into the entire trial aspect, and then permanent injunction will be passed, if any. So these are the ways and means where you have to look upon and think about it. When you actually come across any infringer, then you have to balance it out between your expenditure and investment concept, and then take a call. Now, what more are there? It happens with me in one of the software cases. We were actually not sure whether the opposite party, and this is what I'm talking about a startup. Last year we filed a suit and we were not sure how the infringement is happening and things like that. Then we actually moved an application before the court to go to that particular place and see the software, how it is working, do a reverse analysis, and then come back to the court. And this kind of application was allowed. And if you can see, I would like to share a couple of pictures of my experience where I actually went and seized all the products, got a investigation done, and then came back that this is how they were doing. And this all happened during the pendency of the suit. So you should not be thinking aloud that this has happened after 24 months. This all happened within 3 days of the filing of the suit. So these remedies, government are looking into it, and even judiciary are working hand in hand with the government's legislation to make this particular vision of national IPR policy as a true, that it will see the light of the day. Now, what you will get after 24 months? Say you have run the suit, and what you will get? You can obviously get damage. There are concepts now coming into the picture where you can actually claim legal cost as a damage. You can actually ask the other party how much profit they have made, and you can get a damage out of it. And courts these days are now very granting damages to whomsoever is coming to the court first. Now, even other than that, you don't want to move to the court, the simple process, you can also move to customs, file a complaint, and actually prevent someone who is infringing. It's most applicable for trademarks, where we can see a trademark with the name X for a product has been granted in India, and someone from, say, from any other country is importing with the same product, same mark, importing into the territory of India. Then you can actually simply go ahead and file a complaint with the customs authority. There are IPR enforcement rules 2007 in picture, where you can simply file a complaint and actually can stop the import of those infringing goods within the country. These are the few remedies which I'm talking now, going back to the objective 6 of national IPR policy, and are readily available for any IP owner in the country. Now, this is just a timeline which I would like to highlight. If you will calculate this entire timeline, it will squeeze down to 18 to 24 months. And I'd like to say a comparison, which was the earlier scenario. In my experience, this is something going back to 5 to 6 years, which is no more the case as of date. So yes, the time is good. Identify and then enforce if you deem fit. Then comes to the question is when to enforce. I would like to now go back to my strategy of why, when, and how. This is when to enforce. Again, this is second level of analysis for any startup to be looked into, do expenditure investment analysis. And then what all things you have to look upon to decide when to enforce. Number one is information of infringement. You can actually utilize other government acts like RTI to go to a government authority, whether that person has got some kind of regulations, kindly let me know. You can actually conduct an investigation, and you can actually get a reverse engineering done and expert affidavit. As I was mentioning, that these things can be done even after the filing of the suit. But just be on a safer side, when you want to touch the waters, should we actually go inside it or not? These are the 4 or 5 things which I generally advise to any kind of startup, because they come with a different mindset. Unlike other entities who are actually into litigation, startups come with a different mindset, sort of like, I am seeing this happening. I don't want to spend so much amount of money. I don't have that backup. What should we do? The answer lies, are we really sure about it? If yes, are they really hurting us? If yes, then how much? The whole calculation will actually give you an answer whether it is actually an expenditure or it is an actually a future investment. Some queries what I generally see in my career is, should we send just a single send a legal notice? Answer is no, because that will actually sensitize the other party that you are actually coming behind it. So simply sending legal notices is not a good idea when you can actually get some interim relief during the pendency of the suit. And if you'll see in the down, I have also involved that when you come across, the minimum number of people should be actually involved inside your entity, that what you are going to do, because today's digital world, everything's like spread like a wildfire. So you have to be very particular when you are actually thinking and of enforcing your IP and going with the next step. Now, this is just a brief what is there in our statute. Infringement of patent, when you should consider, when there's an unauthorized use of the patented process, unauthorized use of the patented product, there's colorable imitation, mechanical equivalence, and taking action claim in the future. These are the broader concepts which have different legal interpretation, and obviously this will require an immense amount of understanding to actually come and advise on these particular concepts, that whether whatever I am seeing as an infringement is actually happening or not. These are well settled principles, but just for overview, I just wanted to point out here. Next slide is pretty interesting. What you will do if you get sued. So this is not only to sue, but also to protect when you get sued. There are a couple of defenses available under the Act. You can always claim that I was only involved in research exemption. There are concepts of polar exemption when you are actually doing and exporting something only under the purpose of R&D that is not within the ambit of infringement. I just wanted to show these slides to be for you to understand. Even if you are facing a frivolous lawsuit tomorrow, the acts as well as government are not toothless to not give you any kind of defense. Now, similar concept for designs, when you should actually consider suing it, when there is a fraudulent imitation of your entire design, whether you are consider seeing someone who is actually importing in the country and you have a registered design, you can actually go and see whether we should enforce the designs or not. Similar concept, if you get sued for a design infringement suit, what you should do. Again, there are defenses available. You can always challenge the designs, previously registered, published prior art, not registerable under the Act, and so forth. I have tried to just capture whatever available in the Act, and so that you get an idea that if you want to sue and if you get sued, how the law is around. So now comes to trademark and copyright. You have actually two types of remedies. One is statutory and obviously one common law. When I'm talking about infringement, again, unlike patents and designs, for trademark copyright, you have two kinds of remedies, civil and criminal. And you will, we have seen an number of cases where actually trademark owners are going ahead with filing a police complaint and a magistrate and getting the entire infringing marks and different products seized. So I would like to not much dwell upon when to enforce, because these are just strategy things. I would like to just point out one thing here. When you should actually consider enforcing a trademark, you can see in the top right hand side, identical corporate name, similar goods likely to cause confusion, identical good service which is causing deemed confusion, And in this COVID scenarios, actually, we have seen a surge in these kind of activities. You should not stop. You should actually proceed. Now, again, defenses available under the Trademarks Act. When if you get sued, these are all statutory defenses. I'm not gonna delve much upon it because this entire chapter over it and how to actually protect yourself. Similarly, when to enforce copyrights, and this is primarily for softwares. When you want to do it, you have to first analyze it, and you have to first analyze what is the infringement happening, how it is happening, and so that when you are actually going to the case, because we have to be very clear one thing, the judges are not IP savvy. You have to make your case in a simplistic manner for a layman to understand what you are going to tell. If I'm going to tell my source code has been infringed and things like that, no one will understand. You have to come down to a level to actually express your problem to a person who's actually understand and then grant you a remedy whatsoever you are asking for. Again, these are all statutory defenses which you are able if you get sued. I will not delve much upon it. One interesting thing I want to touch upon is multiple startups come to me and say, Saurav, I don't have an IP. I launched one of my device. Now I'm seeing someone who is actually copying it. So the answer is you are not remediless. There's a concept of passing off where the products actually in market can be this common law remedy can be actually used. But yes, the standard of use varies here, and it can be just simply some of that. Yes, it is always available. You have to showcase reputation, misrepresentation, likelihood of damage, and so forth. The idea was to just to present to you that even if you don't have an IP registered or even applied for, there are some forms of remedies available under the law. Now, how to enforce? These are few things which is self-explanatory. I will not spend much time on it because the first thing is clear title, valid cause of action, and how to establish infringement. I have pointed out 4 points. This is again on the whether you have a valid IP or not, because if you don't have valid IP, the suit will stand. The suit will not be held maintainable. And where you can actually file a suit, it always lie before district court. And this is just a brief overview. If you file a suit here, it will lie in district court, then it will go to commercial division and then to the Supreme Court. However, this all thing is bound by Commercial Courts Act, which I was talking beforehand. Now, interestingly, as I was mentioning, criminal remedy is also available. I would just like to skip and show you this interesting slide where these are actually happening. When we went ahead and filed a police complaint, the police was given an order to actually go and confiscate. If you can see a couple of places where I was actually raiding it, there are a couple of counterfeits actually there. So even on the civil side, there are remedies. On the criminal sides also, there are remedies, and these are more prevalent in terms of softwares. Where we can see in, for example, in Delhi, Palika Bazaar, in somewhere in Bangalore, there are places where we actually keep on raiding on a monthly basis. So these remedies are also available, and these are not as cost effective as you go to an entire full-fledged, and this will give you a quick relief as well. This slide I already explained, and just like to point out last 2 slides because I'm running out of my slot given. 2 concepts which is very important for a startup community to understand. Employees, what are the agreement which an employer and employee has with it, and whether these kind of agreements have standing any court of law. The general understanding is this: if you prevent someone from doing something, that is not allowed. But courts have understood this concept, especially in terms of IP, and I would like to quote one decision from Bombay High Court. It says a clause prohibiting an employee from disclosing commercial or trade secret is not in restraint of trade. This you have to be utilized very carefully when you actually work in a group. Where you actually work in a group and where you can actually form a smaller group and actually grow. You might think that this is all things are not required at this point of time, but this is actually required when you grow in this organization, when you actually grow further. And on this part, the last point I would want to mention, just 2 slides on the case laws. I'll just explain that what happened in these cases. I would explain myself as a startup. I went to someone, showed my idea, another person went ahead and you commercialize that idea without informing me. Technically, I did not have an IP at the first place. I went with a business proposal. That business proposal went ahead and out in the market, and I was left with nothing. In these scenarios, also the courts have looked into the fact, and this is a very important case where someone actually emailed the information of a particular entity about the software and to the competitors, and court actually went ahead and granted relief and granted injunction in such scenario as well. The idea was to make you familiarize what you will do with your IP other than your commercialization, licensing, and assignment part. But when you actually see that something wrong is happening, don't just sit over it. Take action right away, because it might hurt you tomorrow. And as we saw, there are a couple of remedies like civil remedies, criminal remedies, even common law remedies are also available under the law. These things we skip during our discussion, understanding, and we actually don't think on that angle and simply proceed with no, my focus is just to get an IP and get away with it. The focus should be get an IP, protect it. If required, please don't hesitate to enforce it, because laws are there, time is there, and even governments are also supporting, and even the courts are also supporting. So with this, I would like to end here and pass on to Sheetal for any questions, if any.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. This was pretty interesting. Power-packed PowerPoint. So for both of you, it went very well. Yeah, I really liked both of yours presentation, which was more on-ground related experiences that you both have. I think this was one of the excellent panels that we had. Can you go back to your slide 18, 19?
Yeah, I'll just. Yes. Can you see?
19. Go to 19. Okay, back to 18. Yeah, 18. Okay, so if I recall it correctly, you mentioned about even if the patent application, it's still in an application stage yet to get granted, and if you find someone infringing, you should move the court. Is that correct that you mentioned? But how is that possible? Because you still don't have a granted right, and as per section 11 and 12 of the Indian Patents Act, after publication and only after grant, that at least you call for relief for an infringement, or maybe we haven't understood it well. Can you just explain again?
No problem. Yeah, so you are correct, Sheetal. As per 11S7 read with 43, you can't move before a patent is granted. What I was trying to suggest in these slides, when you have a vested right, so this was about the completing a cycle of the entire suit. Say for the cycle is of 24 months. Should a patent owner or holder should wait for 24 months, because till that time technology might get obsolete. So during that period, I was trying to explain, you have certain interim reliefs till the suit takes its maturity. So this was the point I was trying to mention in this particular slide. When you file a suit, you can always file an application for interim injunction along with the suit, subject to obviously you have a granted IP right.
Yeah. All right. So then there are certain questions that asks. It's Professor K.K. Tyagi. He's a former principal scientist at IESRI, and he said that for filing an IPR concerning a new methodology in research paper, should it be first published in some journal, or first of all IPR should be filed? I think we covered this even in the previous webinars, that while you have a grace period for 1 year, even if you have published it in some, let's say, exhibited somewhere, or done an experimentation for picking up certain data records, you can later also file a patent application, because that 1 year grace period is given. But it is always ideal, at least if you ask Saurabh, I'm sure he'll say that you first file a provisional patent application. Even if you don't have full faith that whether it will go through a whole complete specification to a market or whatever, before publishing it in any paper form, I think it is always good to file a patent application. Saurabh?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, because we have been facing these problems, especially with universities, that whether as a PhD student or as a thesis writer, they actually go and publish. So when it actually comes to examination, it's really tough to defend such kind of applications. So it's always advisable to first at least file with a provisional one, then go ahead with whatsoever publication they want to do it, till the time the patent application is taking its maturity to complete into a complete specification.
Right, right. So I don't know whether you heard about Dr. R.A. Mashelkar's quote. He always said patent or perish, while it used to be publish or perish for university professors. I mean, it's no more publications, it's more about patenting and IP. That's what he taught CSIR, and thereafter you saw CSIR become one of the biggest universities, at least biggest patent filers in the Indian patent ecosystem.
Correct.
While Saurabh was giving response to your question, I tried to look at the question, the next one. I couldn't get it fully, but let me try. It says for an invention of a particular drug patent, for invention of a particular drug patent of 20 years is achieved by inventor. As India is trying to go for generic drugs, so for production of generics have to wait for 20 years and then the drug can be marketed. So can we start production of generics within the 20 years? I mean, if I have understood this correctly, she or he, I don't know, the name is not written, I can't make out, but Asker wants to know that if there is a drug patent already granted for, and it's a 20-year term, and if someone else wants to produce generic medicine during the 20-year term, is it allowed or not? So if I understand it correctly, in India, the drug patent linkage is not there. If there is a patent, it doesn't matter to Drug Controller General of India to grant you a marketing approval. These two are distinct. Marketing approval and patent approval are two distinct entities, two distinct bodies. There is no connection between the two. So yes, in India, even if there is a 20-year of term period for a pharma drug, still applicable, a generic producer can get a marketing approval. The only thing that one will have to witness later is to see the court of law, because of course the patentee to whom the patent has been granted would want to seek a reprieve in the court of law and say, okay, you are infringing my patent and I still have 20 years term, you better stop it. Either the relief will be in the form of temporary injunction or permanent injunction, or if it is out of court settlement, then in terms of the damages or the profits.
Yeah.
So to cut it short, I think for all other IPs, while there be state infringement, but for the drug patent, marketing approval can still be taken as we speak in India. So generic medicine maker doesn't have to wait for patent to go off its term, but yes, there would be court case to prove or disprove the infringement. Is that correct? Saurabh, Hemang?
Yes, so this law came in 2010, what you explained, and this we have seen of the gradually. Now there is new clinical trial rules came into picture in March 2019, which actually captures in these problems in more greater detail, that you don't have to actually wait for the first innovator company's patent to get expired. But as you rightly mentioned, till the end, you will definitely, in all likelihood, will face a lawsuit, because patentee has a right to prevent anyone for that 20 periods to stop them from manufacturing whatsoever. So that is the major reason these generic companies, they start preparing by filing Form 29, that is for research exemptions. They don't actually go for Form 45, 46, where there's a commercial manufacture going on. They start at the end of the 19 months with a Form 29. Then they do it for R&D purposes. I was explaining in my slides also, there are a couple of defenses available. If you get sued by virtue of that, you have defend that I was only for doing for R&D. But yes, if you start actually commercializing, manufacturing and exporting whatsoever, there are 99% chances you will face a lawsuit.
Yes, and I think you were hinting sort of to Section 107A of Indian Patents Act, which is about the BOLAR exemption, where if you are using patented drug for the reason of producing the drug, the data to the regulatory agency, that will not amount to infringement. But as Saurav said, if you now start to manufacture that drug, then certainly it's an infringement, but it won't impinge upon your marketing approval. You'll anyway get it, provided you've provided the clinical trials and the abridged studies that are needed by the regulatory agency. But yes, you'll have to sustain the infringement, issue in the court of law. So next question is, good afternoon, panelists. I extend my gratitude for very informative session. My question is directed to Saurav. What kind of systems are companies or IP owners putting in place to actually identify whether IPR is being infringed upon? Are there any specialized forms which keep a look into the market for a client for maybe a particular fee and identify infringements that is being done? It could be in-house by companies as well. Secondly, in your experience, how willing is police authority in registering an FIR or a complaint and take action against trademark infringement, especially in context of YouTube and Facebook violations?
Sure. So I'll answer first queries. One of the best possible and cost-effective method is to identify IP journals. All the granted patents, granted trademark, granted design will be published in official journals, and there you will come to know whether any competing party has actually went ahead and filed some kind of patent applications, trademark applications, design application for that matter. That is one way of looking into it. Another way of looking into it is today's world is online marketplaces. What generally entities are looking into picture, because everyone wants to sell something to gain something, and that's the first place where we as a firm, as I personally as an individual have been seeing and so forth. We actually see most of the infringing activities only online. We don't have to go dwell further, even any further, that whether they're actually infringing or not. I have a product, I saw one online thing of the similar identity, I bought it, analyzed it, and be it trademark, copyright, whatsoever infringement, and we simply went ahead. So there's no hard and fast methodology to be followed here, but yes, based upon my experience, two things has to be kept in mind is IP journals and online commercial activities. Second thing, coming to police authorities, indeed the question is very pertinent, and I would be very jolly here to explain it varies upon state to state. If you want to do in a particular state, police authorities might not be that helpful. But if you want to go in IP savvy states, for example, Delhi, Karnataka, Hyderabad, there I have personally seen that like extreme amount of cooperation from the police authorities. But situation is not that bad. It was bad 2 years down the line, but if you will ask me today's scenario, police authorities do know, because there have been sessions conducting about to the police authorities about counterfeits, how they have to deal about it, and they are pretty much now knowledgeable. Even if a smaller jurisdiction, for example, we raided somewhere in a small place called Sasaram in Bihar. I was surprised to know when I entered in a simple police station, sir, ye hai counterfeit. Ha, CD ka chori hua na. Something like that. The answer was pretty impressive to understand from a police personnel, that he was actually aware of it, that yes, these things are happening. So yes, situation is gradually improving, and I am sure it is not as bad as it was there, like in earlier days when you have to actually sit and understand and explain the police personnel that no, this is something which is actually within your rights to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. In fact, after the Center for Intellectual Property Asset Management under DPIIT, CPAM, they've been doing quite a lot of work with judiciary, with Indian judiciary, with Indian police, with Indian customs authorities. And also there is a tool guide, or what do we say, a tool book that has been created by DPIIT and one of the Chamber of Commerce. And that has been given to police officers, that it provides the steps what to do when someone comes to you, where to go, what all are the things that you must look at, which all are the act provisions that you must identify. So as Saurabh rightly mentioned, there is quite a lot of increased efficiencies in these enforcement agencies. So next question is also for you, Saurabh. So it says that in your litigation experience, have you come across a situation where a startup has sued a shark-sized company in the rightful way, and it so happened that judiciary tilted towards the big shark company just because of the popularity and the mindset?
Yeah, obviously, answer is yes. I can't divulge the name. I can just give you the date of the orders. It happened in Bangalore last year, and 16th of July to the 19th. One big day in my career where actually, as a startup, I sued one mammoth company who was actually there in a space and very well known. And district court was actually inclined to grant an injunction. And as expected, there was 12 lawyers against me. I standing on one side, 12 lawyers on the other side. Within 3 days of me filing a suit, that this suit is frivolous and things like that. And again, district court upheld that injunction, and now it is before Karnataka High Court with the injunction continuing. So there is no, I would say, no hesitation in terms of judiciary when it terms of who is suing whom. They are only looking at the merits. If you have a something IP, other party is immaterial for the time being. If you are able to establish that infringement is happening, then there is no gainsaying in saying no, other party is a big market player or something like that. That mindset is definitely not there now.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, our Indian judiciary has been very balanced in terms of its opinion and in terms of fact finding, the discovery process. So what happens, Saurabh, just try to explain me, if let's say we are in the district court and there is an injunction order given, and that order is now appealed to, let's say, High Court, to a double bench, division bench, and then division bench also upholds the district court's injunction orders. But when it goes to another bench, let's say, for an appeal, it reverses the decision of the injunction. Let's say this whole situation has taken 5 years in order for one to get an appeal to reverse the earlier decision. Now, during this time, injunction remains, or during appeal, is it lifted?
So till the time the injunction is lifted from an higher authority, till this entire period, it is enforced. It is enforced.
And what happens, even there have been cases where a lower judiciary may have given an injunction order, single bench next appeal may have given reverse orders, and then the next appeal gives injunction order again. So how does this injunction keeps lifting and coming back again? How does it work?
No, so say presuming a scenario, district court has granted an injunction, you move to High Court, and High Court has actually reversed the injunction order. You then move to division bench of that High Court. That decision of single judge of this High Court is not correct. Then division bench actually reverse this order of single judge and make order given by district court as an interim injunction to be continuity. So what happens during this period before a single judge and division bench, if some infringement is happening because the injunction was not in force till that time, we actually, as an IP owner, I actually went ahead and filed a suit for more damages, because now injunction has gone back to the date of when it was there from the date of district court. So this goes back to the same time when it was initially granted.
All right, I get that. Okay, then even 500 schemes in India is of no use. We have 13 patents granted, but we could never find a right scheme. I think, Hemang, this is more for you. When we were talking about government schemes available, searching 500 schemes would have taken us 5 years. Therefore, we chose the hard way to fund ourselves. PCT is only interim relief, but sometimes products need much longer time to validate. That is why suggestion of consolidating all schemes is good. Thanks. We are Alpha TUB, the world most innovative tool for early literacy from India. So his question is again the funding schemes and it's decentralization. How much effective are they? How do they find it out? So any comments from you, Hemang, on this? Although I know we've discussed it before.
Yeah, no, I think the right thing is this consolidated repository, right, which makes life easy for startups. Now, I understand, your world and your pain, right? It's not easy to expect all of you to spend this time searching and figuring out the processes, right? Because every scheme has its own required, formalities which need to be completed. So, yeah, I think the action item is up to, I guess, some of us who can position this. I don't, Sheetal, I don't know who the right body is, but at least through our various channels, we can take up the discussion, and hopefully the
Yes.
Startup India webpage, should have this thing. They made good strides, but that can be a single repository where such information can be reflected.
Yes, I agree. Even, as a SUCHAM, we can try create one page that covers all the schemes in one go, and also have this to, communicated to government. Because I think different government bodies are investing a huge sum. But if there is one central repository that can then interact with all these different bodies, because then it also helps in, saving a lot of cost if there is some duplicacy in terms of the kind of activities that different people are managing. So I think we can do that part, but thanks for that question. There is another question, can a core process or activity of a company be patented, which is not unique in the world, but unique in India? I know this is a bit tough because we don't have details much on it, but he's saying that if a core process or activity, the key activity of the company's work itself be patented. Not too sure what kind of company is it, what kind of activity is it? Is it related to business method, or is it related to copyright related industry? So we don't know. But Saurabh, if you have any broader comments for this broad question.
I completely agree with you, Sheetal, because as we discussed while back also, absolute novelty, inventiveness is something we have to look into. So it cannot be territorial in nature. If you are unique in India, it cannot be territorial in nature. It has to be unique in a wholesome manner.
Yes. All right. So maybe we take record of the company and we'll request them to give more details if they need a better legal advice. So the next question, I know we are at 2:45. We have one more presentation left from my side, which is on the IP cases. But I'm finding questions interesting. And instead of, bringing one more presentation up on the website, let's just pick up the questions. Is that okay? Hemang and Saurabh with you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank
All
you.
right. All right. So, but we'll share all the presentations with the entire audience, and there is a request that if we can share the presentations, and we'll be happy to share it. A link will be shared, even for this webinar if you want to watch it later. So it says, by any chance, does any of the panelists have any update on the process of setting up an IP exchange in India, which was supposed to be done by NRDC? I don't think we yet have IPR exchange in India. We heard Madam Nirmala Sitharaman talking about it, that besides India being announced as a hub for use of IP as a collateral, we need IP exchange. Everything needs to move digitally. National IPR policy, as Saurabh, you mentioned, IPR exchange is listed over there. Also, Hemang mentioned about a bit on commercialization, how startups needs to be vigilant on who could be the right market player. But from Government of India, I don't think we have yet any. NRDC already had one, a small subset of it. We also had the one from PISME, which is the Association for All Startups. We have commercialization help coming from and facilitation centers initiated by Ministry of MSME, but I don't think we have nationwide IPR exchange. If any of the panelists have any understanding on that.
No,
No, you're
I don't have any further meaning except for say universities like IITs. They have their own,
Yeah.
I guess, incubation centers, and on their IP web pages and all that, they are listing which patents is it that they would like to be adopted, by product makers or other companies. But it's not IP exchange per se, from what I know.
I
Yeah,
completely
all
agree
I
that
can go ahead, Saurabh.
I completely agree that no such concepts are now been established right now in India. It has been established on an institution organization basis, but not as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. So there is one from CII, which is Gita, GITA. There is another from which one was that? FITT from IIT Delhi. But I think that's more from for the innovations that are emerging from IIT Delhi. Unless there are some startups that have been initiated by some of the innovators. And as you rightly mentioned, the facilitation centers and incubation centers also provide some support. TIFAC from Ministry of DST, Ministry of Science and Technology, TIFAC as an organization, that also provides commercialization support. So yes, there are decentralized again over there in different small pieces that we find, but I know it's truly difficult for startups, and let's do something together to at least put a common platform, let Indian government know about it so that it becomes more welfare enhancing for all. Okay. I couldn't get this question, but if any of the panelists can. Belonging to manufacturing industry, sometimes we face an issue with common machine names. How do we deal with this kind of problems while strategizing our IP?
I'm not following the question.
Yeah. Saurabh?
Common machine name. Yeah. So yes, I have faced one issue in one of the court cases. So my client was sued for a common machine name, and this was a confidential information kind of suit. So we actually went ahead that and stated that this is something which is standard in this particular field of industry. Say, for example, an industry involved in weaving. So there are a couple of terminologies and couple of machines which are standard for those couple of industries. So I was sued for someone for those particular standards, and obviously it was generic in nature, and obviously there was no IP involved. So yes, this is one of the defenses being looked into, but no such observation came out of it because the parties ultimately agreed to settle the matter. But yes, if it is a generic name common to that particular industry, it cannot be considered as something which belongs unique to you.
Right. Can you give some examples, like mention some example of a common name machine?
For example, I was handling one case of cement industry. So there's a mixer and grinders which you use to grind that particular bitter and mixture, and cement will come out. The patent was in for the entire furnace. The patent was drafted that way that entire furnace was patented. So when the suit was actually filed and I was on the defending side, then I simply asked, like, what is the patent for? It is something, what the patent was actually limited to was one kind of outlet opening of it, not for the entire furnace, and that entire furnace was generic to that particular cement industry. Similarly, as I was mentioning about the weaving industries, that machines which you actually use to weave a particular yarn in a particular manner, that is also pretty much standard in these particular industries. Third example could be in pump industries, where there's a particular methodology that the pump has to be of that particular size so that it will be fit into. So that's a ISO standard. So that things are completely generic in nature. These are 3-4 examples which I have faced and I could remember right away.
help me explain a bit more, maybe for the information, a little bit more information. When you talk about a standard, it's the specifications, right, that has to enter into that standardized device. For example, in refrigerators, we see 3-star or 5-star, which at least showcase that how much energy saving are they able to do. If it is 5-star, it is able to save your energy better as against 3-star. Or if you use an iron, which is for, so that it doesn't give you an electrical shock. And there are certain standards that have to be embedded in it. But all these standards, definitely, in order to implement these standards, there are certain patterns which are linked to it. And if there is a patent which helps that standard work, why do you say that it is more generic in nature? Or are we not to understand it fully?
So what I was mentioning about industry specific, when I'm mentioning about industry specific, especially in manufacturing industry, we can see that these terms are there since 1980s and they're still being followed upon. The machines were installed somewhere and the still same machines are actually doing similar kind of process, but outlet is different. But as you rightly mentioned, in terms of when you talk about telecom industry and industries where like it's a fast-pacing industry, the standards will, the concept will definitely differ. But when you talk about these kind of industries where one full-built machinery has been set up, and those machinery are actually doing some kind of flip-flop of processes, there these concepts might apply, but definitely not for, for example, phones. Now we have Type-C charger. So for that Type-C charger, you have a patent around it. That concept will not work in this particular field. It is more appropriate depending upon the kind of industries what we are actually talking about.
All right. So next question, maybe, it could even be for Hemant to address, while thinking if publication in any form, should be is, I believe, is publication in any form considered as prior art, and due to which new patent application cannot be granted or challenged, then why not a simple publication be an equivalent to patent? It will be cost-effective option for patent. A good analogy, but not every publication can give you a grant, right? In terms of right and ownership, you have to get it registered. Because if it's a simple journal paper, it's still under copyright. If you don't file a patent, you are still an owner, and the remedies might differ, right? It will be under the Copyright Act. The only thing is how much effective the remedy will be, because copyright and patent, if you compare both, how much strong and how much weak protection does it offer, then that changes the story. But if it is not a patent application, any publication, someone may still have a copyright over it for seeking a reprieve from court in terms of infringement. But even that publication becomes a prior art for you against your own invention if you have not taken a priority date. But over to you, Hemang and Saurabh. So first, Hemang, if you can give inputs.
Sure. I think Sheetal covered this very well. Also, publications have a different purpose. A lot of times, a publication is there to inform about a particular approach which was taken to analyze, say, a given field. They may have a novelty in, for example, one particular area, like it's probably a new way to study a problem space. However, they may not fully cover, let's say, the things which are the truly novel, right? A patent is trying to kind of draw boundaries on what the exact novelty is, what is the inventor proposing, which is different than the purpose of a publication. A publication, to me, both of those documents have to be educational. They have to teach someone that, hey, here's an interesting new method. But a publication does far beyond that, right? It is really making things into very much like an open book, like a textbook example for other researchers to follow, to adopt. So I would see there would be challenges that even if we were to think about making this happen, it's going to be very hard to evaluate that. Also, there are publications, like I've written review publications where there's no novelty as such. The novelty which I brought in was I studied the literature for say the last 20 years or something, bringing up, highlighting the work of really good scientists and putting together a nice review article. That will not work as a patent, right? Even if we want to consider that, because there's nothing novel. I was just summarizing what has been studied, giving a commentary on what the key scientific highlights are. So interesting thought, but quite challenging to implement.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sheetal and Hemant. I would just like to add one thing, one legal terminology here I would like to add. It's called express anticipation or inherent anticipation. What Hemant explained in a bit-to-bit manner, it's simply what you want to patent has been explicitly given across to the anyone to see. That obviously it's a challenge. But if it isn't given in a some form, like I am working on say something, a title, that could not be considered here by virtue of a granting a patent. So yes, what is there in the public domain, what you want to actually want to do it, they're two different angles altogether. Yes.
Yeah. And if you want to have right over your invention, better get it patented, because otherwise you won't be able to stop others. The only thing that you can stop others is from receiving grant on the same invention. But that allows other party, if you still just have a publication in form of a paper, a journal I meant, then others can also use that invention in the market. Only thing that they can't do is to receive a proprietary right over it. But if you have a patent instead of just a published paper, then you can stop other from at least be in the market for that 20 years term. So it completely depends on how much power do you want to have on your own invention. If it is just a mere publication, then of course power is just to stop other party from receiving a grant over the same. But if you have a patent, you can have exclusive marketing rights. So I think both publications are very important when it comes to infringement action or using it as a prior art, as against using this as a business strategy to be able to receive more funding from venture capitalists. Like Hemang was mentioning that today, venture capitalists are asking how much strong is your IP portfolio, as against, and even the quality part of it, how much quality it is, whether it will be able to sustain infringement action going forward or not. So gone are the age, gone is the time when simple publication would be okay enough for you. I think this, we are sharp at 3, and I would like to close it now with a thank you note to both Saurav and Hemang for accepting the invite. It was very useful, and also a lot of thanks to all the attendees. I hear that we had more than 300 today, and we will have more such sessions. Please keep sending your questions, because I think that's the best way to have a dialogue rather than a monologue. So thank you once again to all of you for participating. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sheetal, for the wonderful moderation. Thanks, Saurabh. And yeah, thank you all.
Thanks,
See you.
Hemant. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.